This lecture will introduce the concept of deaf gain. I'll discuss deaf gain in the context of deaf education and specifically language acquisition. That will be my focus. The notion of deaf gain came from the field of disability studies, which proposed a shift from the need to help disabled people to become normal to the valuing of diversity and difference, whether it be skills, abilities, perspectives. All of us are different, which should be valued. Determining a standard of normalcy began in the industrial 19th century. Normalcy was being defined by measuring human biology, behavioral functions, psychological functions, cognitive abilities, and so on. Research, experiments, and measurement was prolific in pursuit of this standard of normalcy. Normalcy discourses concerning disabilities promoted oralism as the primary pedagogical approach for deaf children. All efforts should be focused on passing as normal. Normalcy discourses focused on measurement, diagnosis, and a medical educational approach to rehabilitation. Rehabilitation's focus is on returning the body to the standard of normal. A stark example is Gerald Loeb. The co-inventor of the cochlear implant. By providing implants for all deaf children, he predicted the extinction of deaf culture. This was an accepted position by those who saw no harm in eliminating sign language and deaf culture. The normalcy outcome would mean everyone must become hearing. Let's open the lens a little wider. Research has shown, quite strikingly, correlations between areas of biodiversity and areas of highly linguistic diversity. Biodiversity in the research, referring to animals, humans, plants, and all matter of living things, are richer in abundance in areas with richer biocultural and biolinguistic diversity. The research shows that in these contexts with linguistic diversity, that biodiversity is highly valued, and vice versa. Biolinguistic diversity refers to the full gamut of the richness and diversity of the world's plants, animals, humans, cultures, and languages. All these elements of diversity are valued. So let's explore how these concepts relate to the deaf community and the theory of deaf gain. To many in the deaf community, being deaf has nothing to do with loss, but it is, rather, a distinct way of being in the world. Nothing is missing, but the experience is different. We ask you to widen your perceptions and perspectives towards understanding insights that are less common to the majority. Through this exploration, hearing people experience deaf gain. Deaf gain is the biological, social, and cultural implications of being deaf and having the deaf experience. This is not defined as a loss, but defined as a gain, an advantage you too could benefit from. A more specific definition is that deaf gain refers to the unique cognitive, creative, and cultural gains manifested through deaf ways of being in the world. Now I turn to focus on how hearing people can benefit from deaf gain. We'll start by looking at linguistic research and the study of language acquisition. Our traditional view of language acquisition has been very narrow. Hearing children perceive sound, start producing sounds that become words, that become sentences, which become stories, which become conversations. Next comes reading and writing. I am sure you are familiar with this long-standing paradigm for language development. There is a different perspective to consider from the deaf experience. First, let's go back to the theory that language is identity. If I speak Spanish, then I therefore have a Spanish identity. The two are tethered. In this view, identity is strictly bounded. If my identity is Spanish, then a certain collection of features are identified with me, and others do not apply, cannot apply. So back to deaf gain and the experiences of the deaf community when considering language acquisition. One hearing researcher, Ofelia Garcia, a leading scholar in the area of language acquisition, hired a graduate student, last name Cole, who was deaf. Cole had a huge influence on Garcia's thinking. Remember, Garcia comes from an exclusively hearing experience. As they were conducting the research, Cole frequently challenged Garcia's perspective. Through their work together, they were able to identify 4 traditional concepts in the field of language acquisition that needed to be reconsidered from the deaf gain perspective. Deaf gain taught Garcia showed that languages are not bounded, languages are not separate, but that translanguaging is happening continuously. Language is not a thing that you carry in your metaphorical suitcase from which you unpack your language. Language is more like a verb. It's something that you do, you act on. It includes visual movement towards developing a richer understanding of context. Deaf children tend to process visually to identify a word and then apply it to an object in the environment, exploiting the resources around them to convey meaning. For example, some of you in a previous assignment were signing your passages, but were also turning your camera to your dog, or used a physical object, holding up a book. These strategies are part of language acquisition. Garcia learned from Cole not to separate language skills. But instead to expand language practices and expand interrelated language practices. By observing deaf children, it was evident that isolating languages from one another was less effective. Garcia learned from Cole language, including visual movements, may develop richer and more complex languaging than a hearing child working from strictly auditory language input. The deaf child incorporates naturally more visual input from their environment, which leads to richer and more complex languaging. Garcia learned from Cole that language development and acquisition is truly complex and identified 3 dimensions: family context, age of onset of deafness, and degree of deafness. These factors all impact language acquisition and expands the notion of developmental complexity. Garcia learned from Cole that language proficiency depended on fluid languaging with other language users. Back to the verb metaphor. Language is always in motion, being enacted in a range of situations, layering on previous experiences. This discovery led to a more flexible position regarding bilingualism for all children, not just deaf children, but all children. So the inflexible checklist you see on the slide comes from the traditional approach. This research shows that dynamic bilingualism in language acquisition is a more natural approach, using skills derived from one upon the other. Garcia learned from Cole the impact of multiple modalities. Using the mouth and signing led to the understanding that all bilingual language acquisition happens simultaneously. The deaf child saying something in English at the same time as signing it was cognitively engaging both languages at the same time. For Garcia, it was an epiphany. This renowned scholar had never considered the possibility before. That is deaf gain. Up until this point, Garcia had considered bilingualism to be linear. As hearing people speak and hear words, it comes in a sequence, in a linear fashion, from which you create understanding and meaning. Cole challenged this notion too. For deaf children and deaf people, bilingualism is a dynamic process, a constant interplay. It is certainly not linear. Traditional bilingual programming has separated the use of the language, perhaps by subject or teacher or room. French is taught separately from English. That's termed as a diglossia approach. Cole acknowledges that hearing children in bilingual environments may benefit from the strict isolation of the languages to their respective contexts or environments. But for deaf students, their languages are being enacted. Sometimes the child may be speaking or reading or writing or signing, but there is a constant interplay which has been termed transglossia. These insights into the deaf experience provided Garcia with Deaf Gain. It changed her theory about language acquisition. Garcia defined code switching and monolingual pedagogies, as most of us do. When two bilingual people are in conversation, they begin their conversation, say, in English, then switch to French, then pops in a word or two of English. Code switching from language to language in a conversation. Cole challenged this notion too. In the deaf experience, both languages could be enacted at once by incorporating spoken language elements or phrases into sign language. Translanguaging, another new insight for Garcia.